For player profiles, in-depth features, and exclusive interviews, visit sfhandbook.com to learn more about the best young football players in the world. Hello and welcome. You're listening to the Scouted Football Podcast. If this is your first time listening to the podcast and you like what you hear, please have a dig through our back catalogue, as I'm sure there will be another club, country or league specific episode which you'll hopefully find interesting and entertaining. If you're feeling extra generous at the end of this episode, whether that be as a long-time listener or Scouted Pod newbie, please consider leaving us a 5-star review on whichever pod platform you use to listen. It's very much appreciated and helps us reach more youth football aficionados the world over. This week, I'm joined by a man who knows a thing or two about football, and in particular, Olympique Lyonnais. Lyon are one of the most successful and storied clubs in Ligue, particularly over the past 30 years, and their academy continues to pump out promising young player after promising young player, just as it has done for decades. We'll be exploring previous OL generations as well as assessing the current crop a little bit closer. But without further ado, Alex Collings is with me. Alex, how are things?
I'm good. How are you?
Yeah, not too bad. Not too bad. It's looking like a pretty bleak global situation again with how things are going with COVID and that sort of thing. But yeah, hopefully we'll see some football played as long as it's safe to do so over the Christmas period. Without further ado, then, just thought it would be good to sort of introduce you to the pod listeners. I know you're a listener yourself, but you've also contributed to Scouted in other capacities before. You're a fan of OL. You do scouting with Africon and you recently launched the Football Per 90 pod. You're very much a man with considerable knowledge on this topic in particular, but in football in general, I think.
Yeah, looking forward to basically this is my main sort of source. This is in Arsenal, so looking forward to chatting. Lyon, I don't often get to do so.
Yeah, so I suppose it's probably best to begin with sort of a brief history of the club, and they have a pretty distinguished reputation for producing young players. There've been various homegrown generations, and the nickname is Les Jones, which translates as the kids, as you'll know. They've got considerable alumni that have gone on to do some really, really good things in European football. You have the beginning with sort of Sidney Govou, Karim Benzema, Hatem Ben Arfa, Corentin Tolisso, Nabil Fekir, Anthony Martial, Alex Lacazette. Just some of the players that have come through at Lyon. Whether that be in the 2007 to 2009 Benzema era or sort of the golden age between 2014 and 2017. But in terms of sort of the recent history and the current state of affairs, Alex, you've got the ownership, the manager. Obviously Peter Bosz is in charge, former Bayer Leverkusen manager. But at the top, you have Jean-Michel Aulas, who is he's an interesting character. I think just this morning, he's been handed a 5-game ban with an additional 5-game suspended ban. He's fairly outspoken, isn't he?
Yeah, he's not afraid of any controversy, or speaking out about, uh, basically speaking his mind. So I'm not surprised. That's news to me. I've just woken up, so yeah. But I'm not surprised he's got a 5-game ban.
Yeah, it was something which I literally saw about 3 minutes before we started recording. I probably should have mentioned before we started recording, but it completely slipped my mind until I saw his name again here. But yeah, I mean, since he bought the club, OL have had relative success over the past few years, but particularly in the early 2000s when they won 7 Ligue 1 titles in a row between 2001 and 2008. They've also got an exceedingly successful feminine side. That would be OL Feminine, the ladies team. And Olas has he's, I don't want to say bankrolled, but he has funded the relative success of this club, which was only founded sort of midway through the 20th century.
Yeah, no, he's. I think overall he's been a very, very good, positive impact for the club. I mean, he's the reason that we had that dominant period in the 2000s. And especially he's also a big reason that OL Feminine is such a powerhouse in football. So he's been, I think, up until recent years, he's been a massive positive force on the club.
Definitely. I suppose it makes sense to get into sort of the scouting side of things, this being the Scouted Football podcast and all. But, the I think it's fair to say that because, the academy is not simply producing these elite players just from the region where Lyon is in France. They've got a fantastic scouting team at youth level. And it's sort of, it's it reflects sort of what you'd perhaps see at the senior level of scouting at other clubs. Is there something that is in particular about OL scouts that make them so good at identifying talent across France?
So yeah, at youth level, there are a number of different things that kind of make us so good at scouting at that level. But first of all, it is just a great scouting team. And they particularly sort of focus in the Lyon and Paris regions. Then we've also established local partnerships with most of the teams in the region. And then yeah, then when it comes to training the actual players, they have a very coherent sort of strategy that goes from literally the under 10s right up to the senior team, sort of based on the Barca or Ajax sort of models of coaching. I think, which is also why there's such a emphasis on technical development. And then yeah, besides that, I think they have good deals with other teams in the regions, and the League Two teams in terms of being able to sort of see their players, that they can kind of recruit them in that middle sort of teenage years stage. And then yeah, I think another big part of it is that apparently everyone, OL feminine, OL masculine, and the youth teams often train on the same pitches. So there's sort of this clear coaching overview that stretches right from the sort of like, let's say, under 19s into the senior side, both senior sides.
Yeah, it seems like it's a very holistic, sort of all-encompassing approach throughout the club. From some sort of the vantage point that I've got of it, it's always seemed as though it's a club which very much focuses on the development of young players as well as the success of the first teams. Um, and like you're saying there, we're having those established partnerships with local clubs in the region, obviously in the sort of the southeast of France, where Lyon is located, but also in Paris, which I think as a French club with a budget like Lyon, you can't be neglecting the diaspora of young footballers or young potential footballers that are in male and female in Paris, because it is just a hotbed of technical players, of fantastic footballing talent in that Ile-de-France region. So it is, yeah, I do. It was kind of what I was expecting you to say, really, in terms of what makes the scouting and the sort of the player recruitment so good before you even get anywhere near that first team level. Um, the following those Ajax and Barcelona models, I think taking examples from successful projects elsewhere is always going to, or should always, pay dividends if you have the right people in place. But in terms of sort of the manager of the men's first team at the moment, Peter Bosz, he's obviously a Dutchman. He's been at the likes of he's a Dutchman. He's been at the likes of Leverkusen, Dortmund, Ajax, and now finds himself at OL. He's in my experience, he's been a divisive manager when it comes sort of like tactically and with sort of his ideals. And there are definitely weak points to his managerial game, but this season obviously isn't going as swimmingly as OL might have wanted. But what is the general consensus around Bosz at the Groupama Stadium?
So I think there's been quite a bit of patience with him. Personally, I was a big fan when he came in, maybe purely for the fact that we've had a lot of, we haven't had a very exciting list of coaches in terms of tactical ideas. I mean, Rudy Garcia's a competent coach, but not a very interesting style of football. Genesio before that, a bit more exciting in terms of his approach, but there a lot of the fundamentals weren't there. So I think there was a lot of optimism. He's also our first he's our first non-French coach since like the 80s, if I'm right. So there was quite a lot of optimism. It signaled a new dawn for us. So I think there's been quite a bit of patience with him that is maybe now starting to the people are getting a bit antsy, and a bit tired of how we're struggling just to basically close out games defensively. Um, and yeah, I think it's basically there's not too many problems with how we're going forward, but it's out of possession that I think he's starting to get quite a lot of criticism, and fair enough, to be honest.
Yeah, that's always seemed to be the case. It was the Bosz's teams will dominate the ball, and they'll dominate it well. I think while he was at Leverkusen, the passing statistics that Jonathan Tah was putting up from centre back were ridiculous, but that was mainly because the ball was just constantly being cycled around the back. It does seem to be one of the weaker points to his managerial game is that without the ball, his teams are considerably less effective, and especially in sort of recent fixtures that I've seen. I think it was the draw with Bordeaux a couple of weeks ago. They just seemed to be so sort of you know permeable on the break. This seemed to be the structure was kind of while pushing for a winner or to extend the lead. It just seemed to be a bit. I don't want to say ramshackle to be too harsh on it on the man, but the especially Bordeaux's second goal, where I think they just steam through the middle, and you think, why is there where is the structure first and foremost, and then what is the structure? Um,
Yeah,
it's
it's incredibly frustrating to actually have to watch that, especially since we have the sort of midfielders who have the capacity to get back then, guys like Bruno and Caqueret.
yeah, right, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. It's been frustrating to watch. When it looks good, it looks good. But yeah, I think I think pressure is coming on down on him now. Olis kind of spoke about how they still have full belief in him, as you would say, but that if results don't improve soon, then they won't be. Which kind of points out there's not full confidence in him at the moment. So yeah, I think it's kind of getting to a crunch period already for Boss, which is really sad for Lyon from an outlook of where the club's going. Because I'm kind of scared if he fails here, then Olis goes back into his sort of French only, um, very sort of more traditional approach to running the club. Whereas for all Juninho's faults, I think him trying to actually bring more of a data and tactical sort of going from outside of France and going for influences from outside of France that has been a good way to try keep this club keeping up with the other clubs that are moving ahead of us.
Yeah, the dreaded vote of confidence followed by a but in the same sentence. It's not. Yeah, it's not what you want to hear as a manager, really, is it? And yeah, I mean, you say that Jean-Michel Aulas may go back to his previous way of thinking. And I'm just putting two and two together here. I don't mean to make you worry unnecessarily, but Claude Puel is now available, having been sacked by Saint Etienne. So I don't want to say that's going to happen, but nobody wants to see that happen. Believe me.
Yeah.
After what happened with Adil Oshish at Saint Etienne, geez, I do not want to see that happen. But yeah, I think it's probably best if we actually discuss some of the young players at OL this season, because that has been one of the, I mean, certainly from our perspective, one of the brighter sparks or the brighter points of the season and of the club in general, because it follows a trend, it follows a pattern that this club have tread for many years. And I was sort of doing some research before the final group games of the Europa League, and it was that the OL had used 6 teenagers in the group stage, but also done really well in that group, which included Glasgow Rangers, and topped the group. Uh, and 6 teenagers was 2 more, if I'm not mistaken, than the next most teenagers used by any other team in the competition. And there were quite a few sides who did blood them, but it was the responsibility that Bosz gave those youngsters. I mean, there was 4 or 5 who started in that last game week against Rangers. I know it was a dead rubber, but the previous week against Brøndby, the previous game week against Brøndby, there were 4 or 5 in the starting 11 again. Has that been a common theme throughout this season, even in Ligue 1?
So yeah, I think that's absolutely been one of the positives of Boss after Rudy Garcia. And it really speaks. I mean, in the last game was actually Virgil's start. He's the right back, the teenage right back that's younger than Malo Gusto, who I'm sure we're going to discuss later. And I think, yeah, just the fact that we played them when we didn't really need to, both Gusto and Dubois, our first choice right back, were on the bench, kind of points to how willing Boss is to play the kids, as long as they kind of fit into his sort of demands of what he wants from them in the team. So that's been an aspect I've been very very happy to see, and it has definitely translated, or yeah, it's been reflected in the league as well. Guys look like Lukeba, Habib Keita have got lots of chances. Yeah, and Gusto, of course.
Yeah, we discussed Malo Gusto on this podcast right at the beginning of the season with Ali Madden from the Road to Nowhere football podcast, and he was saying that Gusto, depending on what happened with Dubois, might see some minutes this season, and he has done, and I'm quite pleased with that, because while there have been games such as that Bordeaux one, as luck would have it, where he hasn't been great, there've been others where 2003 born fullback playing in a top 5 league regularly hasn't looked like that. He's looked a lot more assured. But yeah, as you mentioned there, you've got the likes of Malagusto, Sinali Diomande, Castello Luqueba, and then the more mainstream names. I think it's fair to say, your Maxence Caqueret, Houssem Aouar, Rayan Cherki. They are the ones who. I mean, first of all, one of them is on a Scouted Football front cover, volume 11, but also, they're Houssem Aouar has been linked with Arsenal for, it seems like, the past decade, and you've also got Maxence Caqueret, who's done well in the Champions League in previous seasons. So there is a good under-23 crop here, a very healthy young element to this team, as well as your more established senior players. Out of those young players, including the likes of Vogel, who is 2004 born, I believe, which is sending my head in a tailspin. Who do you like watching for OL this season? Has there been one in particular that's stood out? It doesn't have to be the most obvious one, but because I'm sure we'll get onto that at some point.
So in terms of my favorite player, it has to be Caqueret. I've been a massive fan of his since before he even played for the first team. I know he's maybe the most boring choice alongside Awa, but yeah, he's just a fantastic player to watch. Incredible ball winner. Um, just in terms of his high energy, he's someone who I thought would fit Bosch down to a T, and he has done. To be fair, I think the tactical, our leakiness isn't his fault. But yeah, he's just a fantastic player to watch, and I think maybe what I enjoy most about him is just how vertical he is. He's always, when he's trying to receive, he's immediately looking to get the ball directly up, not trying to build it around. He's a good facilitator too. Um, yeah, and I think it's been great to watch his development. When he first came onto the scene, he's always had that vertical aspect to his play, but a lot of it was just giving and receiving. There wasn't much carrying in his game, which is something that I think he needed to kind of add. And yeah, over the last 2 seasons, that's become a big part now. He's very good at carrying through tight areas and then putting the ball forward again. So yeah.
Yeah, Kakare is just so active, isn't he? He's just, the pressures that he puts in every week is just immense, and you think that he's going to be somebody who definitely pleases Peter Bosz when it comes to that sort of thing. I mean, it's also not as though this is a weak midfield that he's playing in, despite being very young, because he's the best, and the rest of the team are just insufficient. You've also got, I mean, up until recently in a positional change, Lucas Paquetá, Bruno Guimaraes, Houssem Aouar, who we've discussed previously. There are also some very distinguished and established players in that position, but Caqueret is in there on merit. I think it's fair to say.
Yeah.
Um, I mean, yeah, like I mean, it's the spread of talent is immense, and it then it does lead you back to the question of, well, how are they not doing better than they are, or why are they not doing as well as they should be? But yeah, just in terms of a player in general, with Maxence Caqueret, where do you see him? How do you see him developing in future with OL? Because obviously Liga is or it was until the beginning of this season one of Europe's top five leagues, and he was obviously getting regular minutes. How do you see his future sort of panning out over the next few years?
So it's actually funny you say that. Recently, I was just thinking when with Rangnick coming into United, I've got this terrible like idea that he might be someone that they might actually go for because he sort of fits Rangnick's whole idea of winning the ball back in 10 or winning the ball back in 8 and getting a shot off in 10 kind of perfectly. But yeah, I think he's the sort of player that fits so many different sort of with all the high pressing, high energy teams. That's sort of the trend amongst dominant teams in Europe at the moment. I think he's probably there's a good shot behind Cherki as our most valuable player. Um, just in terms of where he can kind of slot in without needing to be the main man in midfield necessarily. So yeah, I think he's also pretty much at this point he's rounded out his game really superbly. There's nothing that I feel that he needs to really improve on besides maybe becoming a bit better at actually dictating and controlling the play. But then again, I think there's also a reason to say that there's space for those players that are more just there to facilitate, especially in tighter areas, than needing to dictate the play. So in a way, I think he's already kind of getting to the full package, and now it's just about um, just about improving on what he's already really great at. So yeah, I think he's a player I'm particularly high on in terms of where he'll go. One area maybe that he could improve is presence in terms of in scoring, but I don't. That's the one area I never see him fully realizing.
Yeah, and I suppose that's an area which you don't always need to develop when you're that type of player in other areas of the pitch. If you are a constructor and a destructor, you don't always have to be a sort of a move creator, a move developer, or sort of a goal creator or a finisher. It's takes a lot to make a team sort of thing. But you were saying there that Ryan Cherki is probably the most valuable player, or the player with most value to OL at the moment. There's and rightly so. I think there's a lot of hype around him at the moment. The past few seasons, he's definitely been on most youth football fans' radars because he's been coming through the OL Academy, and I mean, you just see the things that he does with the ball. Even when it was in sort of his UEFA Youth League days, the stuff that was going on was just it was piss taking at times, and he still does it now when he's playing senior football. He hasn't had a run of games in Liga where he's had sort of consistent starts, maybe 5 or 6 over a consistent period, which is fine. He's still 18, turning 19 next year, I believe. I think he's another 2003. But he's just such an exciting player, isn't he?
So yeah, Shirky's probably he's the best talent I've seen coming through at Lyon, and maybe the best 16-year-old I've watched at least in the last, let's say, 5+ years. Yeah, I mean, I remember basically one of his massive games that kind of put this idea that this is the best 16-year-old I've seen is his game versus Nantes in the cup a couple years back. And yeah, he scored 2 goals, got 2 assists, pretty much around the entire game. He even won a penalty at the end, and wanted to take it himself, but then Moussa Dembele kind of pulled rank and missed, unfortunately. And I just remember even the confidence after the game where Cherki said that he would have put it away himself if he'd been allowed to take it. Yeah, it just kind of points to a guy who's insanely good on the ball and has the confidence to sort of back it up. Yeah, and I think besides just being ridiculously precocious and also very very fun to watch, he's also a very interesting profile for his type of sort of you know um, playmaker, attacking forward sort of thing. Is that rather than being like you expect of most sort of players, when you think of a precocious player at his age, you think of someone who's kind of probably rapid or maybe a bit Adeyemi-esque, right? But he's actually kind of a tank, Shirky. So So yeah, a lot of his plays is really just I've seen him shrug off guys, and I mean Ligue 1 is full of like tough midfielders and centre backs and forwards to deal with, and I've seen him shrug off players twice his age, and it's one of the core things that he has that just adds to that insane technique, ability to pass off both feet. He's also a really, really good, intelligent player. You kind of see him where he'll fail once against a player, then he kind of solves the problem, and then the next time he'll kind of find a way past them. So I think there's a lot to like about what Cherki has. And yeah, depending on how he develops physically, I guess the sky's really the limit there.
Yeah, one of the things that stuck out to in what you said there was just the sort of the control and the poise that he has. Obviously the technique is immense, and anybody who is hearing about Rayan Cherki, spelt Cherki, for the first time today, who's gone off and just watched a few YouTube clips or something, the first thing that will become evident is that technique. But the thing that I really like about it is his ability to just isolate defenders in those one-on-one situations. It's almost like he keeps them at an arm's length. He'll stand them up, not too dissimilar to what Hatem Ben Arfa used to do. Actually, not comparing him to Ben Arfa just yet, but just in a very self assured, self confident way of I'm gonna keep moves ticking. We're just recycling passes inside, recycling them out wide, until the moment where I identify that in fact this fullback or this central defender is on the back foot or is wrong side, or they're showing me down the side that I want to go down, and he'll just use that quick burst to beat them. And the rest is history when it comes to that technique. Cutting onto his left, opening up that angle. He can do that just as well as he can drive into the byline and cross into the back post with his right. And I think having that diversity, especially in the type of player he is as an attacking player, so young, is something which is only going to stand him in good stead, and is the main reason why we're looking at a player who has been hyped to the nines.
Yeah, I mean, actually, it's interesting you speak about how he kind of gets past players. In the way I see it is that it's actually not so much he doesn't have the burst of guys like that I would compare him to Hudson Ben Arfa for sure, and also maybe Eden Hazard. But what he has is he has a really nice sort of the way he's just so good at keeping the ball close to him. He almost kind of waits for the defender to make the first commitment before trying to skip past them. So I think he's made up for that maybe lack of explosiveness that he has to other top level talents. We are just with that ability to keep the ball close, incredibly quick footwork, and just to get past players.
Yeah, that timing and control is just it's emblematic of a player who's a lot older than 18.
Yeah, 100%. I think he's also an incredibly good decision maker. I think what you kind of see with as you see with most sort of players as they get to this sort of phase of development is he's got a little bit more selfish, so maybe sometimes is taking the shot on when he should be making the pass, but it's not
Mhm.
something to really worry about because I think he's just trying to up his own sort of goal up, which was something that I mean, it sounds weird to give that as a constructive criticism to like a player at 17, but that he probably needed to work on for this season. But yeah, I mean, he was showing at 16. That I go back to that Nantes game. Just the decision making is incredible to watch, and when you pair it with that sort of technique, especially, I mean, I think my favorite part about him might be his passing technique with just how he can bend balls around the corner with the slightest of back lift. It off both feet as well. Yeah, actually, on that point, it's one of the things that I'd be interested to see where his future kind of lies because he does lack that, and I don't see him develop. I think he's pretty physically developed as he has been. Not to say there could be a chance that he develops a bit more, but I kind of think he's kind of reached where he is physically. So there is some reason to say that maybe he might be better in the center, and I'd actually really like to see him. He's one of the few guys I can think that can play a proper 10 role,
Mhm.
and yeah, and especially considering just how good he is off both feet. Yeah, I'd actually really like to see him move inwards, and I think that could be where his highest potential is going forwards.
Yeah, he does keep things ticking, doesn't he? Sort of in when he does move into those central spaces, he seems just like what I said in terms of him sort of keeping keeping players at an arm's length. He knows that he has the wherewithal to go past them if if that be through his timing or his decision making. So he knows that he can just nonchalantly just place passes sideways, play them into his teammates, drift into space. Yeah, I think he's a very self assured player, very very talented indeed. I mean, a lot of people are probably sick to death of hearing Houssem Aouar's name, particularly Arsenal fans, because that seems to be a transfer saga. I mean, you especially, Alex. But that's been sort of a transfer saga, so to speak, over many years now, many transfer windows at the very least. Um, but I mean, just this season in general, sort of transfer speculation aside and all that jazz. How has OR been for OL this year? I mean, obviously lying 13th in Ligue 1 is not great, but obviously topping the Europa League group. What's this season been like?
So I think it's probably best to start like last season wasn't his best. I think he gets a bit harshly criticized for it because he started off so badly, and that's sort of when the focus was on him, especially from more of a Anglo sense, with all the Arsenal fans sort of watching him. Yeah, he had a pretty good first half of the season, and then struggled to kind of get back in with guys like Paqueta and Caqueret keeping him out of the team. But yeah, this season he's been playing largely off the left, and yeah, he's been playing really really well. He's getting back into that sort of what I think he lost a little bit. Just maybe it was confidence. I'm not completely sure, but he lost a bit of that movement, that in between the lines, and then receiving, and then being able to try get those shots off, or try make those passes. I think he's got more comfortable with that back in his game now, which has been really really good to see. And he probably is someone who would be a pretty good addition for Arsenal. Still, I'm not sure if we're even interested. I've hear, not to keep it on an Arsenal thing. I hear we've kind of moved on to Kulusevski, but yeah, I think it's a bit of a road back for redemption, sort of, from our. And I do finally think I've said it for like 2 seasons now, but I do think this is now finally his final season here. And yeah, I'm not exactly sure where he goes, but yeah, I think he's still his stock is a little bit lower than the player that's still there. So I'm interested to see where he goes, and I'm sure he'll do very well.
Yeah, it does seem a little bit lower than it has been at previous times, but still he remains one of the stars, so to speak, of this team, one of the more identifiable and recognizable players. Some of you may have followed OL's under 19s in the youth league in previous seasons. They're not in it this year. In their own right, there are still exciting young players in the youth teams at OL. One in particular is Mohamed El Arouch, who is an exciting attacking player. Now, I'll be first to admit I don't know an awful lot about El Arouch. I know he's a name to be aware of, very much in the same way that 2 and 3 years ago Rayan Cherki was a name to be aware of without having seen an awful lot. Is there anything more you can give us on El Arouch, Alex?
Yeah, so it feels a bit lazy, but my first sort of impressions when I watch Alarouche is that he feels a little bit like a almost a regen of Houssem Aouar himself. But I think, yeah, that maybe it's a bit lazy. It's just down to the same sort of technique, how he likes to play onto his right foot a lot. But yeah, I'm very excited about Al Arouche. I'd say he's the most talented player to have not yet made his appearance for the club at a senior level. And I think he's maybe even just watching him at youth level, he stands out more to me than guys like Malo Gusto and Lukeba. I think so. I'm very excited about him. Yeah, just in terms, he generally also plays off the left, similar to our most comfortable in the middle. And yeah, I think one of the things I really do like about him, and why I see, if let's say Bosch is there in the future, why I see a future in the first team for him, is that he's quite a hardworking little guy. He's quite not too big and kind of small, stockish almost. But yeah, he puts a lot of pressures. He's got a good sort of sense, at least at youth level, of when to press a player, which is quite nice. I think that's one of the things that maybe bar Kakare, a lot of Lyon players coming out of the academy don't really have that tactical discipline of knowing when to press, when not to press, what to do off the ball. I think Cherki, as good as he is on the ball, is an example of that, and that's kind of been a reason why he's been he's been more slowly introduced into the first team. I think recently there's been um there's been some reason to think, or there's been some encouragement that he's kind of coming on board with Bosch's philosophy. But yeah, back to Alarouche, I think he's got that already. And yeah, he's what I really like is his stockiness, and he manages to, yeah, he can kind of drive forward with the ball and hold off bigger guys before offloading it. So yeah, there's a lot he's got a lot of the classic Lyon sort of technical ability, and kind of mixed with a little bit more of like a terrierish type of attitude and physicality to kind of move through. Yeah, one final note on him is I really like his sense of passing and when to pass. He doesn't try overdo it, as I think many players of his talent do kind of try to do it at youth level. He has a very good sense of when to make that final pass.
Yeah, that's interesting. As I said, I hadn't really seen an awful lot, but it's exactly what we like to hear on this podcast. You know, a player who hasn't made a senior appearance yet, who is rated as one of the best, if not the best, in the youth setup at the moment. So yeah, maybe we'll be seeing a little bit more of El Arouche in future. He is one of the players who has, and understandably, given his name, a North African link to OL, and that is it's a theme which has been, quite long running in the club, over many years. You know, lots of players coming through with North African heritage, Algerian in particular, and obviously. Anybody who's familiar with France's colonial past will know that lots of African, many of whom were Algerian migrants, did arrive in Lyon during sort of the 20th century, with Lyon having been France's third largest city. I think it still might be. And as we see in many densely packed urban areas across Europe, across the world, the socioeconomic conditions of sort of the social housing indirectly produce and develop, a street football culture, similar to what we see with the banlieue in Paris, and similar to sort of cage football in South London. Um, it sort of developed amongst migrants, though, that street football culture. And I know from people who've lived in France, who've played football in France, just we're talking, five-a-side kickabout level, that the North African players, even the ones who are not professional footballers or attached to a club, just simply play a different type of game altogether. And they're extremely talented, and for that reason, it's no surprise that there's such a rich heritage of that coming through at OL. And in the Scouted Football Handbook, Volume 11, two of our editors, two of our OGs, Stephen Ganavas and Lou Davies, did sort of a joint piece on OL, and touched on that link with the Algerian players, or the dual nationals. You've got the likes of Yanis Tafer, Mehdi Zefan, Rashid Ghazal, Nabil Fekir, Yassine Benzia, even the likes of Karim Benzema, Fares Balouli. There has been a historic link between this club and the descendants of migrants, and it's one which is reflected to this day with the likes of El Arouch, Cherki. These players have North African heritage, and I think it's something which certainly should be celebrated, because it's an identifiable aspect of one of the most successful clubs in France, and a migrant group have played a major part in the success of that over the years. In terms of sort of like the investment in the academy, compared to I mean, certainly in England, I'm led to believe that the amount of money that gets pumped into the OL academy, whether that be the infrastructure, the actual in terms of recruitment of players, is quite considerable compared to other clubs.
Yeah, we pump in 10 million a year, I think. And yeah, I think that's just a big part of our dominance. Obviously, I think something I kind of skimmed over when I was speaking about the success of the academy, but yeah, it's just to kind of get a complete sort of control over that region where you do have a lot of those Algerian links, and those players who kind of play that kind of street football you were speaking about, that we kind of see coming through with guys like Alarouche, Cherki, Aouar, Kouiri, someone we haven't spoken that much about, but I'm a big fan of. Um, yeah, I think it's a big part of what we do, and maybe also another big part of it is that these guys are allowed to play with players that are older than him from very, very early. I think it's what Olus calls his N+1 or year+1 sort of thing. So Cherki was playing for the under 18s, even under 23s, well, under 23s youth league teams at like 15 years of age.
Yeah, it's mental to be doing that. I mean, it speaks to the fact that, you know, he's already at 18, sort of at the level where you wouldn't expect him to develop physically any further, as you said earlier. But yeah, I mean, it shows that if you fund something, then likelihood is that it's done in the right way, that it'll end up paying dividends. But one of the other things that you raised to me, sort of off air, Alex, that was quite interesting to me, at least, was the fact that all are sort of aiming to create partnerships with, you know, sort of, I don't want to say local, but sort of like nearby Ligue 2 clubs, to, you know, to be able to create partnerships and to sort of create a very loose network of teams, so that those young players that we've been talking about are able to get decent league experience at Ligue 2 level over the next few years, so that they're not going straight from the under-19 team into regular first team football at Liga and Europa League level.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's something that we haven't really seen with the top prospects yet. Guys like Cherki and stuff go straight into the first team. So I'm not sure, because it's a more new sort of thing that Lyon have been trying to do. So I don't think we've seen the fruits yet. Guys like Yaya Samara and stuff are more who kind of maybe worth an appearance in the first team, but don't really have a career with us longer term. Are more the guys that seems to be aimed at the moment. But yeah, I think it'll be interesting to see. I mean, it could be great to actually have guys like, for example, Guri, actually going back to him. I think we had him just because he was too talented, but Garcia for us to almost think about loaning out, but Garcia didn't really want um to use him. I think that could have been a much better opportunity for us to have not to have given playing time to an incredible talent, but not um yeah, and not just, let him go in the way that we did.
That just about wraps things up for this week's episode. Sort of a deep dive on OL and the scouting, and the young players, and sort of the academy around one of France's more prestigious clubs, or historied clubs. Currently 13th in Liga, but getting through to the knockouts of the Europa League. Peter Bosz at the helm. Jean-Michel Aulas facing potentially a 10-match ban, but definitely a 5-match ban from sort of football operations on match days, because of comments made about referees. And the likes of Rayan Cherki doing a madness on a twice on a bi-weekly basis. It's never dull, I think it's fair to say, Alex. Anybody in the UK who hasn't managed to catch a Lyon game this season, I definitely implore them to do so. They're
Yeah, we're not
broadcasting.
particularly good, but at least we're fun to watch. So
Yeah,
I
from a
highly
neutral perspective.
recommend.
Yeah, I've enjoyed watching from sort of a neutral perspective. And anybody who likes enjoying, youth football, you can always guarantee that there will be definitely somebody, to keep an eye on in OL games. But yeah, all that's left to say is thank you to Alex for coming on. And where can people find you? Where can they engage with your work? Where can they listen to you again on sort of other podcasts and stuff like Football Per 90?
Oh yeah, so thanks so much for having me on. It's been really, really fun to speak about Lyon football and the players. Yeah, in terms of catching me, Alex FRCO on Twitter, and then yeah, I've got a new pod sort of started up called Football Per 90, and yeah, you can catch me there.
Yeah, I definitely recommend getting involved with Alex on Twitter, but also Football Per 90 as well, because you can't have too many football pods, can you? But yeah, this has been the Scouted Football Podcast with me, Joe Donoghue. Stay safe, take care, bye for now.